The Shepnaz podcast begins now.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Shepnaz podcast. I am Pastor Zack, and I am the host of today's podcast, which is a unique and new thing for us here on the Shepnaz podcast. But I am blessed and honored to be here with my brothers Joe and our pastor Rob. So welcome in, fellers.
Thank you.
So this probably has taken some people by surprise.
It's taken me by
really
surprise.
Previewed this. I am sitting back, watching the sermon podcast unfold in front of me.
Wow.
Because, well, it's a new church year.
It is.
And we decided time to shuffle the deck.
Hey.
And so it's you.
Here we are. I'm trying to get used to a new side of the table. And it's adjustment. It's an adjustment.
Yeah. I'm on the same side, but it's still weird.
So now you'll have to figure out like how is my intro going to sound?
Right.
Now Joey tried to every time when he was hosting before me, he always tried to work in the church mission statement.
Oh.
Yeah, I probably did that 2 or 3 times. I was like, forget that.
Well, we just have to change it again anyway.
Right.
Hint.
Yeah, you can
Hint,
start
wink.
practicing on the new draft.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing well so
Foreshadowing.
far. It got started.
Hey.
It's recording.
There you go.
Did you say what we're actually doing today?
No, I haven't
Okay,
gotten there
go
yet.
ahead.
I didn't know if we wanted to.
Well,
dive right in or not.
before we go, I just thought it would be good to say that as we talk about transitions, there's just a lot of things that change around here all the time.
Right.
And Joe has done an outstanding and amazing job hosting the podcast. And nothing's changing because of anything bad. It's just a matter of, changing responsibilities and those kind of things. And so Zach's going to take over and Joe's going to not lead it, but he's done an amazing job, and I'm grateful for the job you've done. You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you.
What are we like, about 1,000 podcasts so far? Do you know how many
We will hit that this year. I mean, we are in year 4, and
so crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
like as the time that we're recording this will be, let's see, 41, 2, 3, like the 45th episode already
Oh my
in
goodness.
2026.
Wow. That's amazing.
They crank along.
Podcast machine making right here.
Yeah, it just keeps on
Wowzers.
coming. So,
That is
well, you've
wild.
done an amazing job. So
thank
thank you for your leadership in that area for sure.
Absolutely. Well, the cool thing is, if you have not had a chance, we're going to be recapping Pastor Rob's sermon from this past weekend. We're continuing on our series on the 10 Commandments, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what we talked about on Sunday, and it was a fun topic.
Yep, 3-letter word.
Yep. Who's going to say it first?
Well, it's interesting because I thought I would cover 3 commandments in each sermon, and we would get through this in 3 weeks. But then I started, I'm like, I can only get 2.
Yeah.
And then I started on this one, and I'm like, I've already cut a lot. So it's like, we're just doing 1, and it's on adultery. But we're going to talk more about sex than adultery. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I think it's interesting when you think about sex in the church. There's always some negative connotation and stuff.
Right.
You always, mostly because when you're growing up as a teenager, sex is like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And so it becomes this taboo topic. But the truth is that sex was created by God. And one of the things I was thinking about when I was working on the message is that, in Genesis, it talks about how God created everything. And then at the end of every day of creation, the Bible says it was good.
Yeah.
And so literally all of God's creation is good. And so to just be sure that sex was created by God, it was his idea. And when you when you think about it in an appropriate way, I should say,
right.
and you think about how God gave us this gift, how he designed men and how he designed women and how everything just works together, there was some forethought that went into it on his part.
Right.
That it was a loving thing that God did for us, that he designed this gift and He gave it to us, and the goal is that it would be a good thing. Unfortunately, like everything that God creates that's good, the enemy takes the good and tries to create counterfeits, and bad things come from it. And so in our culture, there's certainly those kinds of things that happen, but we want to talk about the good side because God gave it to us as a gift. And just to be reminded that it's a good thing. We used an analogy in the beginning of when we started talking about the 10 Commandments of like a river, and how a river has boundaries or has banks. Right. And as long as the river flows within the boundaries or the banks of the river, it brings good things to us. But when it overflows those banks or flows outside the boundaries, it becomes a bad thing. And that's exactly how sex is. God gave us boundaries. The boundaries were that it would be used in a committed marriage relationship between a man and a woman. And when sex is kept inside those boundaries, it's a good thing. Right. You know, I mean, if you're married, you know that. But when it flows outside of those boundaries, it becomes a negative thing, and it brings destruction on multiple levels. Right. So there's all kinds of things that are not so good about that. But yeah, so God gave Adam and Eve this gift and said, here are the boundaries. And, you know, you think about the different, like sex has different functions for us, right? There, and we talked about some of those on Sundays. And the first one was procreation. So God, you know, created sex, gave it to Adam and Eve, and then he says to them, be fruitful and fill the earth. Now, I'm just like, let's just be honest. How lucky was Adam? Right. I mean, he's like, go have enough sex with your wife to fill the earth with children. Right. I mean, what? I mean, Adam's like, God, you are awesome. I love you. I mean, let's just be serious, right? I mean, that's amazing. So we obviously know that that's one of the things that God does for us. The other thing about sex is that, you know, we have children, we have sex, but it's also a relational thing. Right. And that sex is designed by God to create a bond between two people that's intended to last for life. So when I was a youth pastor, one of the things that I did was I taught sex ed in high school. I had the opportunity to go over to the high school, the public high school across the street, and I got certified in this thing and was able to teach sex ed. And you know, kids have all they know everything. They're cool about it. And I'm like, well, let's start talking about stuff, you know, and then you start talking about how God designed sex, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that or whatever. Right. One of the things that sex is created to do is that it creates this relational bond between two people. And so when two people are together having sex, their bodies release a chemical called oxytocin. And this it's a bonding chemical. So you're having sex with hopefully your wife, or you're a woman having sex with hopefully your husband. You're there with them. You're having sex. Your body's releasing this chemical, and it's a chemical that creates this physical bond between the two of you. Right. The same chemical is released by a woman when she's nursing a child, and it allows the child and the mother to bond together as well. And so the idea behind this is that God says when you're having sex with your husband or your wife, this chemical is released. It creates a bond between you and that person that you have with no one else. Right. And so it intensifies the connection that you have. And again, it's just this incredible blessing that God has given to us to help us to bond with our husband or our wife. Now, the problem is that this is all good inside the boundaries of marriage. Right. Outside the boundaries of marriage, if you're having sex with somebody, whether you're not married yet, you're having sex, your body doesn't know that you're married or not married, and it releases this chemical, and you create this bond with another person. Or if you're married and you commit adultery and you have sex with another person, your body releases chemical, creates a bond with that person. And so now you are creating these multiple bonds, which what it does is it weakens the bond that you initially have, and it creates multiple bonds. And so you don't want to be thinking about somebody else when you're having sex with your wife, or you don't want your wife to be thinking about somebody else when she's having sex with you. But these are one of those results of that. So God, obviously, his grace can help us in those situations if we've made mistakes and done things we wish that we wouldn't have done. But the idea is that God even thought of this thing. It's like, this isn't just to have children. This is like, when you have sex, I'm going to grow you guys closer together. And then the third reason we talked about was that recreational. In other words, God created sex for married couples to express their love and pleasure to each other in a way that you don't with anyone else. And so there's other people in our lives that we love, but there's not other people in our lives that we love that we have sex with, right? And so this idea of having sex with this person is that we know this person in a way we don't know anyone else. And it's obviously designed to be pleasurable as well. Proverbs, Solomon talks about this when he's talking to his son, and he says, "Drink from your own well, my son," and that's a metaphor, right? Stay with your wife. And he says, "Be faithful and true to your wife. Be happy, yes, rejoice in the wife of your youth. Let her breast and the tender embrace satisfy you." And this word "satisfied" in Hebrew is the word ravah, which means to bathe, to make drunk, to fill, and abundantly satisfy. So literally, Solomon is saying, you should find all of your sexual needs met in your wife.
Right.
And don't try to find your sexual needs met in another person, because if you do, you're drinking from another well.
Yep.
Is basically what he's saying. And so Paul talks about this as well. And I like it when we understand that the Old Testament oftentimes and almost always is the New Testament confirms things in the Old Testament.
Right.
And so Paul says husbands and wives should satisfy each other's sexual needs. A wife doesn't have authority over her own body, but her husband does. In the same way a husband doesn't have authority over his own body, his wife does. Don't withhold yourselves from each other unless you agree to do so for a set time. Devote yourselves to prayer. But then you should come back together so that Satan doesn't use your lack of self-control to tempt you. And Paul is basically saying is that we're sexual beings. We have these desires. If we can't find our sexual needs met in our spouse, we go looking other places. And our culture provides lots of other places to look, right? I mean, just get on social media, you can find that. There's pornography, there's movies, and then there's just the opportunity to be with people that you shouldn't necessarily be with if you're married. And so what the idea here is that do your best to find your needs to be met in your spouse. And so to also, this is one of those needs that God created us with sexual needs. And so it's a blessing that we can be married and have that need met with our spouse. And so that's one of the other things. Then the last thing that we talked about, the fourth reason or function of sex, is that sex really has a spiritual component to it as well. I remember when I was in college, we just got out of a staff meeting. We were talking about one of the professors that was there. It was Terrell Sanders, and he was talking about how one of my friends asked, "When is a person really married? Is it when the preacher says I pronounce you husband and wife, or is it something else?" And his answer is when you consummate the relationship. That's when two people become one. And so in this act of sex, there's a spiritual thing that happens, and the Bible says that sex creates a spiritual union between a man and a woman that makes them not two individual people, but one. And Genesis talks about that. It says, Genesis 2:24 says, "This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one." I like how the Living Bible says it. It says, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined with his wife in such a way that the two become one person. Yeah. And I think that's probably, I've looked stuff up and tried to read stuff. I even used AI stuff, and they're not wasn't very helpful. But I think it's a mystery, I can't tell you how two people become one, but they do. And this Hebrew word that is used for one in Genesis means to be seen as a single person. So what God is saying is I now see two people as if they're a single person. Yeah. And the best example I can think of that is in Scripture is the Trinity. And you think about the Trinity, you have the Father, totally separate, exists on his own. Yeah. The Son, totally separate, exists on his own. And the Spirit, totally separate, exists on his own. Three distinct individuals together, one.
Right.
One is not the other's not the one, but together they are one. And I think it's interesting how in marriage, there's this same mystery that exists within the Trinity that takes two people and they become one. They're seen as one person by God. Yeah. And one of the things I love about marriage, when I do premarital counseling, I talk to couples about, we talk about personalities and everything like this. And So, for example, in personality, we take a personality assessment that, we're only typically one type of personality, but there's multiple different kinds of personalities. Not that you have multiple personality disorder, but I mean, like there's different, there's outgoing people who are quiet or whatever.
Yeah.
And in marriage, typically it's the couples are opposite. They're not usually the same.
Yeah.
And so when two people come together, one person brings who they are, the other person brings who they are. They're not the same. They come together, and if they become one person, they're better. Mm-hmm. They're more than they were on their own.
Yeah.
And I love that about marriage, and I think that this is what this is talking about, is that when two people come together, they come together. This act of sex makes them one. It's not what the pastor says.
Right.
Like when I do a wedding, I'm like, I now pronounce you husband and wife. That's the covenant side of it, but the consummation of the covenant is the act of, consummating the marriage, and that's when two people become one. Mm-hmm. So that's a beautiful thing. The scary part is that you can do that and not be married too.
Right.
And so you're becoming one with other people also. So there's this danger of I
think overall, what we have sometimes a difficulty understanding is that we see the spiritual world and we see the physical world, and we compartmentalize and don't realize that it's simultaneous.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And sometimes we think that the physical stuff is not really spiritual, or the spiritual stuff isn't really physical, and don't understand that it's one and the same.
Yeah.
When God created this, he didn't create separate rules for spiritual and for physical. It's one.
Yeah.
And so kind of in the same way of that mystery of the spiritual and the physical being one, now you have a man and a woman becoming one.
Yeah.
And it's because they are both physically and spiritually connected.
Yeah. And you see in our culture too, the culture that we live in order to sell the lie, they compartmentalize it. Like I can have sex with somebody and there's no consequences.
Right.
Well, the movie might not show the consequences, but there are.
Yeah.
Because you bonded together relationally, your bodies release this chemical, you're bonding together. You there's this thing that happens in the spiritual realm. Something that there's all kinds of spiritual connections that happen. Yeah. So we compartmentalize it, but it's not, and that's one of the good things about this. Mm-hmm. Well, a couple other things really quick, and we'll wrap this one up. But one of the things it's interesting to me is that adultery was a very serious matter to God. So the commandment is thou shalt not commit adultery, and it was a serious matter to God. In fact, it was such a serious matter that it was a capital offense. So we talked about the death penalty last week, and talking about murdering. Well, if you were in the Old Testament to commit adultery, the offense was, if you were caught, the offense was that you were to be killed, right?
Yeah.
The adulterer and the adulteress. So both of them, the Bible says, must be put to death. Now, when we talked about laws, we talked about how there are civil laws and statutory laws. That's what these are, civil and statutory laws. So we don't kill people today for adultery, which is good. But the idea behind it is that it was such a serious thing to God then that the punishment was that they would be stoned. That was how it was normally carried out. Yeah. But today, it's still serious. Like, the seriousness of it hasn't gone away. Mm-hmm. Because in the New Testament, the Bible even says that God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. So the judgment is that we experience these consequences that you never see in the media. There's all these consequences, right? And the consequences are huge. There's physical consequences of adultery. There's emotional consequences and lack of trust and insecurity that is formed. There's the spiritual consequences, and something we don't even talk about are the financial consequences, right? I mean, maybe one person it may lead to divorce, and so then you have two homes that are that one maybe doesn't have an income, or the one person might have to find another place to live, and we don't talk about how it affects children and all those other kind of things. And so it's just so far reaching. And so you start thinking like, well, maybe God wasn't like a big prune by saying, don't do this.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, I gave you this gift. I want you to experience it, and I want you to experience it to the full. But here are the boundaries, and if you can keep it within the lines,
Right.
man, it's good.
Yeah.
But if it comes outside the lines,
It protects the value of it too. I
Yeah.
think, like when God gave it, it wasn't like just a small thing. That's what we've been
Yeah.
talking about this whole time, is like, it's a valuable
Yeah.
thing. And, if you're given a gift, I'm thinking of like, I can't think of a really good example that I might be able to share here on the podcast. But if you're given something that's a very valuable gift, right? If I'm given a bowl of diamonds by somebody, and like this is a gift, and I keep giving those diamonds away to somebody, I'm giving you this gift, I'm giving you a piece of this gift. Eventually, the value of that gift, it gets diminished to where it doesn't mean anything to you anymore.
Yeah.
And so, what God meant to be this extremely valuable, beautiful thing that was just meant for you and your spouse, you've given away and diminished its value too.
Yeah.
And so by God putting these parameters around it, it wasn't to like make it so you can't enjoy it. No, it's to make it so you can enjoy it to the fullest extent of what it was meant to be.
yeah.
I was just going to revisit, when you're talking about adultery requiring death. It wasn't as though all of a sudden in the New Testament God was thinking, I was kind of harsh back then.
Yeah.
And I need to go lighter.
Yeah.
That it still requires a death. It's just that now that death has been put on Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't think any less of the sin just because we're not killing people over it. But that it ultimately did take his sacrifice.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%,
That's
man.
good. Well, one last thing, what you're mentioning, this bowl of diamonds reminds me of something we used to do when we talked to kids. We talked about how, when you had sex, there was that chemical that was released that created a bond between two people. And we illustrated this by taking a piece of duct tape and sticking on a guy's arm, and then you rip it off. It's like this is, you're having sex with someone, so this is this bonding experience, right? And you rip it off, and with the tape comes dead skin cells and hair and everything else. Then you're like, hey, let's stick this on somebody else. And like, of course, nobody wants that to happen. But stick it on another person. It's not as sticky again.
Yep.
And you keep going over and over. Eventually, it's like there's no stickiness left. And then what happens is the value of that gift has been diminished so much that it doesn't have meaning anymore. And so, when God says, don't commit adultery, he's not like trying to ruin your life and keep you from spreading the love. Right. He's like, I want you to experience it to its fullest. And so, that's really good. So,
That's good, man. Well, that's pretty good stuff, I would say. We ready to wrap it up, fellers?
You're running this thing.
Oh, I know. Weird. Well, we are so glad that you joined us. Hopefully you got a lot out of that episode. I know talking about sex is not always the most comfortable thing, but in reality, it is a beautiful gift that is given to us from the Lord, and in the right parameters, it is a beautiful thing. So if you have anything you want to ask us or anything you want to comment on, please feel free to reach out to us at Shepnaz podcast at shepnaz.org. I'm still learning.
You're getting there.
I'm working on it, baby. I'm working on it. And share with your socials. Let's get the word out there about this podcast. And we can't wait to hear from you. Have a wonderful day.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.